Hi guys, welcome back to the Bad Batch After Show. It's me, Mike, all Star Wars, and I'm so glad that you guys have joined us once again for another edition of Bad Batch After Show. This week we're talking about the episode Faster, and I think that's episode 4 of the Bad Batch already. There's still so many episodes to go, but we're getting there. So and we're a couple weeks away from the mid season two episodes. How would you call it? Mid-season episodes. So that's
Double
pretty insane.
feature.
Double
Yeah.
feature, something like that. So there you go. But so I mean, this week you might just be saying like, what's there to talk about? There's stuff to talk about. I'll get into my overall thoughts in a bit, but I just want to say like, does it stack up to last week's episode? For most, no. But that's okay. This episode was so fun and things to talk about and things to explore. So I'm just keen on talking everything about this episode. But yeah, so joining me to discuss this week is returning to the Bad Batch after show is Austin, Star Wars editor. Austin, how are you doing today?
Great. I'm super excited to be back to discuss the Bad Batch. I have quite a bit of thoughts, which is funny because it's one of the episodes I feel like not a lot of people have big things to say about it, but I actually really enjoyed the episode. So I'm super excited to talk about it this week. And thank you for having me back on the Bad Batch after show.
Of course, of course. Thank you for coming back on. It was such an awesome time, doing the first episode, the premiere, and just reacting to it. Now this is an episode I would normally skip, just talking about, but I was like, no, like I want to document the experience and stuff like that. But also helping me to document the experience is from the Wayseekers podcast, Chelsea. Chelsea, how's it going this week? And it's finally awesome to have you back on a podcast that I'm doing because I think the last time that we did that was a year ago already when we did the Fallen Star review.
Right. Yeah, that actually just recently popped up in my Snap memories where I think I sent it to my friends because I was nervous because that was my first time ever like being on a podcast, which is now like crazy because I'm part of one and I'm here and I'm very happy to be here. Exciting. Like Austin said, I actually really enjoyed this episode. Like I think, I just had a lot of fun with it. And there's a couple details that, like, as a DuckTales fan, I will get into that, like, are not relevant to Star Wars at all, but made me very happy. So, yeah, I'm just excited to, like, talk about it with y'all.
Awesome. And I am too. But before we get started, I want to quickly mention that our last episode of the Bad Batch After Show covering Cody's episode, as I alluded to, is not on this channel, but it's on the Star Wars Exchange channel, which is, you can find it link in the description, or you can find it on a special playlist section that I have on this channel, on the All Star Wars channel, dedicated to just the Bad Batch After Show. When you podcast with someone from Australia, schedules don't align as much. And, so it's we only get to cover so many episodes of these. So I was just like, the Star Wars Exchange is a collaboration between me and Ari, so it didn't feel right for me to just be putting videos on there and just making it like a solo show. So I was like, I have this platform, so that's why the episodes are going to be either on this side when he can't, or he can't, and when he can, we'll do them over there, or if he's not feeling it, we'll still do it here. But I literally want to cover like all the episodes here just because I think it's something great about like Star Wars animation. It's like my favorite. It's like my soft spot for Star Wars, and I just like love covering all the moments. And I always regret not doing that for Rebels. So I'm like, I really want to start here, whether I'm enjoying the ride or not. But yeah, check out last week's episode. We're joined by Noah from the Star Warrior on Instagram. He joined us, and we just talked about all of Crosshair and Cody and all that stuff. And yeah, so go check that out. Okay, so let's get into this episode. Inevitably, we're gonna get back to Sid and go back to doing the day-to-day stories with her and the missions that she sends the Bad Batch on. And some people were very hesitant about that, and so was I. But for a change, I thought they played with that tool a little bit more of a like kind of a unique style, but it still felt like in the Bad Batch area type stuff. So here are my overall thoughts. Let's get into the overall thoughts. I'll go first, and then we'll go around the table here. So I thought we finally had a good standalone episode from Bad Batch, because I think from season 1, everyone just looks at those episodes as filler and stuff. But this one felt like a great standalone episode because we got like great stuff from Tech. We got cool Omega moments, and like it was just a nice self-contained story where it wasn't like, feeding off to something else. I think the only standalone episode from last season that I could think of that they were trying to do like its own self-contained story was the episode with the mining, with the train carts, those mining carts that they were doing. When I really don't know what was going on that episode, but I don't know. This one I just had fun with. Like I usually watch with these guys here the episodes of Bad Batch, and we stay up and we watch and stuff together. But yesterday was really tiring, so we're like, let's just go to bed, and it's probably just gonna be another one of those Sid episodes anyways. And I ended up just laying in bed and I watched it, and it was just a chill out session. So I actually just had fun with it. Love that the overfilled cast was separated. This is what I've been wanting. I love that. I think Echo and Tech are very similar characters sometimes, so it just felt nice to break away from that and send Echo his own way for a bit. I was thrilled with the music and sound design. Like that was epic. We'll get into that later. And also I just felt like this felt like an intricate episode of Star Wars Resistance. Like I think it was the racers. It reminded me so much of the premiere, the debut of Star Wars Resistance, where they had like this big race. I don't know, like it was really cool, and it felt like I was kind of getting nostalgic for that show, which I still haven't finished, by the way. But I think this episode, this is shocking to say, but I think I'm tired of the animation style that is Clone Wars style, which I never thought I would say. But I think this episode, there was just at the first half of it, I just got bored. I got so bored. I'm like, what's the point of doing this cool animation style if you're just doing nothing with it? I just feel like they've upped and upped themselves where now it's just like, great. Now we're just walking like these two like cool looking figures that the animation style I just love. They're just walking across like cheer or the crowd cheering, and it just feels bland to me now. I don't know what it is, but it just feels bland to me. I think Austin was saying something about the animation style. At least Luke, retire that one. And I was like, I love my Clone Wars animation style. I love that we got the Rebels one, but I love Clone Wars animation style. And I think after this one, I'm tired. Like I'm just tired of it. So kind of like how I got tired of the Shrek animation style with the first Puss in Boots. I'm just like, this is just bland. This is just, and then the second one, go watch it, by the way. Very, very great movie. But they did like this completely like kind of like the animation style from Into the Spider-Verse. And it's just upbeat, vibrant, and just full of life. And I would love something like that for Star Wars. So anyways, that's a side tangent. But those are my overall thoughts. Chelsea, you watched this episode. What were your like expectations for it, if you even had any? And then what were your overall like thoughts, things you took away from the episode?
Mm-hmm. I'd say overall my expectations were kind of low because after such a good episode last week, we all were kind of figuring, okay, it's just going to be another like task of the week kind of episode, which in a way it was. But I think, we talked about how we were also tired and went to bed. I think that like helped me help the episode surpass my expectations, like not staying up till 3 a.m. to watch. Because I think at that point, when you're so tired, you're like, really, this is what I stayed up for, versus like, oh, I'm watching it in the morning on my way to my appointment or whatever. And I'm like, oh my God, this is like fun. And I think it also felt more reminiscent of that kind of like Saturday morning cartoon feeling then. And, this is a show geared towards a younger audience. So like that was nice having that feeling. And I was like, man, why have I been staying up? But aside from that, I had a lot of fun with it. And right off the bat, when Teo the droid was introduced, I was like, that's Dewey Duck. Like, that is Dewey Duck. That is Ben Schwartz. And I like just paused and Googled it because I didn't want to fast forward to the credits and actually spoil myself. And I was like, I was right. I'd recognize that duck anywhere. So that was just cool to have Ben Schwartz in Star Wars in like an actual speaking role, because I know he's like credited for some of the voice for BB-8, I believe.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
So it's just cool to like hear that again and just hear, I'm like, this is, anyway, let me not go on a DuckTales tangent. But I don't know, that made it hard to be annoyed by him because I know he's kind of an annoying character, but I was like, oh, but you sound so similar to like one of my favorite characters, so I can't hate you. But it's always fun to get like new designs and things and world building like that. It's funny, you were talking about the animation thing, but one of my notes for this is that, oh wow, the animation and music paired together was really stunning in this episode. Like normally, like I think for me, it's kind of because it's so seamless, I don't particularly pay attention to it. But I found when they like panned in the crowds, I wanted to pause and look at all the different species because they're like, oh my gosh, they all look so good. And how many do I recognize or how many are new? So, but I understand what you mean by it. I can imagine it's kind of tiring. And I think you are a bigger Clone Wars fan than I, and I don't watch that as often. I do gravitate more towards Rebels and Resistance. So I think I don't want to say this animation style is almost refreshing for me, but it's not something that like I'm consuming a lot.
Gotcha.
So I never thought about that way. And I also didn't think about the Resistance comparison until you made it, which I love that. I love
Hey.
a good race. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
who doesn't love a good racing sequence? So yeah, definitely had lots of fun with this episode.
All right. And Austin, let's hear from you what you think of the episode overall.
Listen, so both of you guys have mentioned that Bad Batch, it's a very repetitive show. You know, it's very much like Sid has a mission for them, they're gonna go do the mission, and that's really it. I really feel like this episode was written by somebody who understands that issue. You know what I mean? That like it's a very repetitive thing to do, but it's also kind of the core of the show at this point. So what Matt Mitchevitz did was kind of took that same formula, but was like, okay, what if we did that, but actually gave some substance to it? What if we did that and actually kind of followed along the plot? I feel like, 4 episodes in, I kind of finally feel like this kind of gave us a sense of direction for where the Bad Batch may go. It's kind of talking about maybe their loyalty. We see the clones, a lot of the clones are struggling with, feeling like they're not loyal enough. They were able to partake in Order 66 because of this inhibitor chip. So the Bad Batch is different from the other clones. So what if these clones are kind of about to struggle with being too loyal to Sid? Someone like Sid could betray them. Now, honestly, this episode, Sid, I really have found Sid to be an annoying part of the Bad Batch show. I'm just like, okay, come on, this is getting old. When it first happened, it was like 1 or 2 episodes. I was like, okay, this is cool, but now it's like, okay, we still have Sid in the show. But for the first time ever, I actually really enjoyed Sid in this episode. I really appreciated that they actually brought her on the mission this time and also got to give some more to her. We kind of saw that she has like a past with these other characters and such. And then also seeing just the way that the relationship with the Bad Batch has evolved with Sid. I really like seeing that, how they were willing to do whatever just to help out Sid. You know what I mean? And whether that helps them out or not, or whether that's good for them to be loyal to Sid, it's yet to be seen. But for the first time ever, I'm like, I can't wait to find out. I cannot wait to tune in and find out what happens with the Bad Batch. As for the animation style, I really did appreciate this episode because one of my things that I really don't like about the animation style of the Clone Wars, I don't really like, but just feels a little repetitive, is that after watching it for so long, so many seasons, so many different TV shows, you kind of start to see the cracks in it. And I think one of the big cracks is that it's so expensive that they don't always get to bring new stuff to it. A lot of things like Tales of the Jedi or the Bad Batch are really just reusing stuff from the Clone Wars and updating it a little bit. But one of the things I really didn't like about season 1 or kind of took me out was that they had like 4 character models that they would use on, all the different humanoids. So it was like, okay, you got the human, but then there's a Pantoran that looks exactly like that. And so you kind of see like there's nothing new really brought to it. But one thing I really appreciate about this season is I feel like they're bringing new stuff, making new models and such. I think, isn't the species of I can't remember his name, but the one that is the leader of the rival racers that was beefing with Sid, I'm pretty sure it's the same. That's a sequel alien, because isn't that the big
the
guy
Dowden
from from Maz Kanata's castle? So I really appreciated that too. Like, they're bringing in new species and stuff. They're not just reusing stuff. So I really did like that. And as you guys mentioned, it was very much like a Resistance episode. I would have, where was Yeager at? It would have been cool to see. But you know what? One thing I can't fault them for is the cameos. Like 4 episodes in season 1, we saw like 20 people that we know. They're kind of using them sparingly, so I really
Very
appreciate
true.
that.
Very true. Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with what a lot of what both of you said. So can't wait to discuss here. So let's jump right into it. I mean, so the way this doesn't work, I just have talking points. It's basically the outline of the episode, but like all the important stuff that I want to hit. So starting off, I mean, yeah, we start off without Hunter there, without Echo. They're on a separate mission, and I like this because it's like at first we're like, oh, Hunter's like the main character of the Bad Batch, and then the next they would tease us like that, and then the next episode it's like, oh, Hunter said 2 words. So it's like I felt like they didn't balance out the crowd all that well either. So I like that they got rid of Echo and Hunter, and they're like, Tech, you're getting all the spotlight this week, and I absolutely love that. So they're on a separate mission, so they're absent obviously from this episode. And as we're talking about Sid, she drags the batch into another mission as they act like security personnel for her as she attends like riot racing. I think that's what they called it event, which I thought was insane. And then we're introduced to Sid's racer, as Chelsea already mentioned, Teo, who's very lubricant and expressive and has a bit of a attitude. So I thought all of like the beginning episode was really fun. And I'm like, I was chilled out in bed just laying there watching, but I was just like, oh, here's the formulaic Bad Batch episode coming into play. And I really think they did so up until Tech took over, and then it was just like the riot chase. Then I think they switched it up, but I'm like, oh, this is like the same stuff. But one of the highlights was Teo. Definitely, I haven't seen any hate for Teo, but I definitely knew that there's gonna be people out there that thought he was gonna be maybe like just too much of a shock factor in Star Wars, because I don't know, people like to further Star Wars to be serious and stuff. But I thought Teo was such a delightful character. I was like, yeah, and there's a moment that made me laugh with Teo that Tech had said something and he like switched his face back, and he wasn't even like the focus point in the frame, but you could see in the distance that his like face turned the other way around, so his body was still facing that way, but his face turned around to look at Echo or Tech, and I thought that was so funny. So anyways, with all that being said, Austin, actually let's go to Chelsea, because I forgot we'd left off from you. But Chelsea saying about the introduction to the episode, were there any thoughts? You could go on your little tail rant if you want, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I also appreciated having a bit of a break from focusing on like Hunter and Echo. I mean, I feel like Echo still hasn't even gotten that much. Like we got a little bit with the first 2 episodes with like, his comments about Omega and everything like that. But I think it was really nice to see also it's a different dynamic, right? Because I think something I appreciate more about this season, even though it's just getting started, is that even though sometimes the batch is all in the episode, they've already broken it down and changed who's with who. Because I feel like first season, it was literally just always Hunter, Wrecker, Omega were kind of like a 3, and then the rest of them were kind of just there, versus now like they're changing the dynamics up. So we're seeing kind of a newer dynamic of, okay, remove these 2, and now it's just Tech, Wrecker, and Omega, and like what does that look like? So I really appreciate that. Yeah, Teo, listen, I thought he was hilarious. And people, like you were saying, people take their Star Wars a little too seriously sometimes. Like, Star Wars has always been a little funky. It's always been a little camp. Like, we love a good little frivolous droid voiced by a really good actor / voice actor. Like, I don't know. But that's the thing, is like the whole entire time I was hearing Dewey Duck, and I just like could not, like, it was Dewey Duck with a little bit of a voice modulator. And there's like episodes in DuckTales where like Dewey has like a kind of like a DJ helmet, kind of like Daft Punk. And I think he's called like it's like a play on whatever. And he's like trapped in it. And the way he talks in that helmet is kind of how he sounds as a droid. So I just like, I really could not like separate it in my mind. So I couldn't help but love him. But yeah, I mean, I did like that while it did kind of follow a formula, that Sid was like, oh, you're coming with me, instead of like, oh, I'm sending you out. So that, a little bit of a change on the typical thing that we see. But yeah, it was, riot racing. I was like, oh wow, more names for what I feel like is the same thing, but okay. But
Yeah,
I guess
right?
everything is a little different. but yeah, I think the setup for the episode um set up really well. Again, I like just the kind of very simple explanation of like they're out. Like they're just not here, cuz I just sometimes like love those kinds of explanations in shows where it's like normally sometimes the absence is like a huge deal and like whatever, but just it's kind of, it doesn't remind me of the somehow Palpatine returned, because this is obviously more planned out and more connected, but just the one-off lines and that the way it's just like, oh, okay, like clearly the characters in the scene know what's going on, but they have to just say it so we know.
Exactly.
um
Right. Yeah, for sure. And it's like they're out getting Wampa nuggets, and it's like, oh, thank you for letting us know. Like,
I was
yeah, for
like,
sure.
Dino nuggets are kind of canon, I guess. Like
Yeah,
that's the
exactly.
thing. My big question from this episode: are Wampa nuggets just made out of Wampa meat, or are they shaped like Wampas, like how we make chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs? Like these are the questions that I need the answers to.
All right, and hopefully we'll get it very soon, because I mean I was very interested of popcorn and Star Wars, and they have Mantel mix, from Galaxy's Edge, and like the little. So I mean anything's possible here, and Austin, I mean you hear about anything being possible. I mean, what was your like first reactions to like the introduction to this episode and everything?
Yeah, I mean, like you guys said, we see Sid and they're in the same place, and it's like, oh my god, man, like this again. But then I did like that it felt different, that we have Wrecker and Tech. In a perfect world, it would have been like Tech and Echo, because I feel like Wrecker, he's been developed,
Yeah.
But so that's one thing I really liked, and one thing I immediately picked up on. I was like, this is going to be a Tech episode, let's go. And I really liked the way that they used Tech. But yeah, I thought it was interesting. Pretty much exactly what you guys said, like Sid actually saying, oh, I'm gonna go with you guys, let's go. I was excited, and I like Riot Racing. Well, one thing I love about the Clone Wars is that they got to experiment so much with like different genres and such. How like a Star Wars movie, it's always like this big mix, like episode 1, for example, has pod racing for like, a whole 30 minutes, and then there's a whole like 10-minute race, just the movie pauses just to have a cool race, um and one thing I appreciate about the Clone Wars is that you can take like one episode or an arc or something, and you can have like a Western, or you can have like a race type thing. You can have your Top Gun Maverick in Star Wars. And that's what I feel like this was like a nice race episode. It, felt like a typical racer movie. So I really liked that. And I loved the way that Riot Racing looked. I remember seeing in the trailer thinking it was Coruscant, just because like
Yeah.
how bright it was and such. So
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, I definitely agree. And I do think that it's like it's just Star Wars' version of Mario Kart or something like that. So because they got to like hit each other with stuff and everything, and it just a very reminiscent of pod racing, of course, obviously.
yeah.
And Sebulba throwing wrenches in people's pod racers and stuff in their engines. So yeah, anyway, so yeah, very good start to the episode. I thought. I mean, I thought it was just different. It was because I thought they were just Sid was gonna hang back with Omega or something, but they went ahead and did something different. So that was pretty cool. Okay, so during the race, Miligi has his racers take out Teo, which is very sad. Omega makes a wager as Miligi comes to collect Sid. She proposes that if Miligi wins, they will pay double. If Team Sid wins, they get Sid. Weird bargains there, but Tech is annoyed of Sid's dealings, getting them always all into trouble and having to rescue Sid. And then Miligi claims that the outcast will soon get to know the real Sid. Okay, so this whole middle part of the episode happens and stuff, and a lot of things mentioned. I think for me, just to start off the conversation here, I think first of all, I love that Tech was very expressive about him being annoyed that it's Sid always getting them into trouble, because I don't know how I still feel about Sid. Like, I think she's funny. She has funny one-liners, but I'm just like, oh, like why is she so unappreciative? And I love that this episode addressed all that. Because I think back to that mining episode and how they all risked their necks to save her, because Omega was like, come on, we have to save her and stuff. And she still was semi, appreciative at the end, where I'm like, you would have been caught by the Pikes. You would have been still captured or whatever. You lost your entire facility, and these guys took it back for you. So anyways, I love that they addressed it with Tech in this episode. And then also this was like the first hint at well, I mean, when Maligi and Sid meet, I'm sorry, when Maligi comes to Team Sid's pit, we right away know that him and Sid have like a past together. Romantic or not, probably. I don't think romantic. I didn't get that. Unless people are starting to ship out there, but I definitely am not. But I think that it was like some type of partnership and stuff, because show me your new crew, acting like if he was replaced or something. So very interested there. I think that was very appealing of Sid, but I think he was just teasing out there, especially at that scene thing at the end, which we'll get into later. I don't know. I just thought that him claiming when he had Sid in captivity or at his lounge. Oh yeah, that's also another thing. He was watching like he was just sitting there with his like jug or whatever and watching the race happen. Total resistance moment when they're on the when I feel like the upper class people of that what do they call the place?
The Colossus.
The Colossus. There we go. When like the private sector, I feel like it would be all the racers watching another race happen or something. So that total reminiscent of Star Wars Resistance. Anyways, I thought those two moments stuck out and stuff. So anyways, Austin, let's hear from you. What did you think of like the middle portion of the episode and stuff?
Like you mentioned, Sid at her best in this episode, quite honestly. I really did like hearing a little bit about her past. And honestly, I don't know what you would like call this type of character, but I feel like her and oh gosh, what's his name? You just said it. It starts with the M.
Maligi?
Maligi.
Mhm.
Maligi. Like that type of character, or like Maz Kanata, kind of like pirates maybe, or just scoundrels. But I'm also a sucker for like a character like Han Solo or like the Mandalorian that doesn't exactly have the best past, is kind of in it for themselves, but kind of goes on this mission, or not this mission, but this journey of like becoming a better person and becoming less selfish. And if Sid's one of those characters, which I think this episode really hinted at, honestly, she shot up my favorite characters list. Like I really appreciate a character like that. Redemption's a big thing in Star Wars, and it's really cool to see how that can play out in big or little ways. And I feel like this is kind of like one of the smaller scale ones. Sid is no Kylo Ren or Darth Vader out there committing mass genocide, so it is nicer to have this type of smaller scale one where you can kind of really appreciate the redemption in full. So yeah, I really like that. And I want to hear more about Sid's past. Like in the High Republic right now, we're seeing that Maz Kanata and Dexter from Attack of the Clones were in a relationship. I want to know,
Really?
like, yeah, I want to know, like, did Sid and Maz Kanata date as well? Like, I want to know. There's a lot of history there, 900 years. So
That's interesting, and I think that what you were saying about characters with like shooting up the favorite character list, that happened with Captain Doza from Resistance for me, when we went into it, literally his closet, and you see an Imperial uniform and you're like, what's that? What's that about? So I totally agree with you there. How about you, Chelsea? What did you think of this middle section?
Yeah. Talking more about Omega, I have to remind myself sometimes that she's just a very headstrong kid, because the way she's just immediately like goes up to this guy who's like, first of all, like just intimidating, because just that's the build of his species, right? But also has some ties to like gambling, potentially to some shady business like Sid does. And this kid just goes up and is like, we're gonna wager and we're gonna win and get her back. And I'm like, girl, like, I mean, it's a kid show, right? So like I figured they're gonna come out like victorious. But sometimes I'm and two, like going back to like the first two episodes, she's so determined to get like the loot that like all of this stuff happens. And I'm like, oh my God, please relax. Please be a kid. But like obviously under the circumstances, we know why. But
Right.
I was like, man, she takes after the people around her, and that she's very headstrong. But like you mentioned, I did appreciate how Tech was like, why would you do that? Like, what the heck? And then, like, Austin, you said a lot of great stuff about Sid that I wasn't even really thinking about because, I like was like, oh, okay, we're alluding to stuff in her past and we'll see how it plays out. But I do like this idea of a redemption arc on a smaller scale. And also, I think you both have mentioned this earlier, like this question of loyalty and like how the Bad Batch's loyalty will be like challenged in the future after this. I'm curious to see like after this whole thing, like what are Hunter and Echo gonna think? Like are they even gonna talk about it? I don't know. So yeah, just now we are really setting up for action. And then too, seeing how poor Teo, that was so funny. They had
Yes.
picked Teo, and then he just gets like kaboomed like randomly out of nowhere. I was
Yes.
like, okay, that I love a little slapstick in my
Yeah.
Star Wars. I needed that.
That took me out. I was laughing. I think the second time I watched it because I forgot it happened, and the way he was like, "No, we can't play defense. We have to play up," and then he just gets taken out. I was like, "Oh, that was funny. That was pretty good." So yeah, yeah, great points from both of you. Okay, so speaking of Tail, yeah, this is my next point. He gets taken out by a loose racer, so that's cool. So Tech takes seat into the cockpit of the racer. Tech races, but without weapons, and this is the part that I love because it wasn't just like, oh, I feel like when there's action in Star Wars Bad Batch, it just feels meaningless sometimes. So I'm like, oh great, we're gonna hear amazing sound effects and hear cool music, but there's just no substance to the race. But they remember that these are special clones. So he was able to think with his head and be like, let me divert all the power to I know this is kind of dirty racing. It's called riot racing. Instead of shooting at people, I'm going to just protect myself and use all my energy going to the shields and my power. So that's cool. And so then he gains a lead also by taking the Death Trap tunnel. And I think this whole sequence was really cool because, as Austin mentioned, I thought this was on Coruscant taking place, like the tunnel stuff. So it just felt like a nice blend to me of Phantom Menace appreciation, with the racing. And then with, of course, with you got the interior, it just looked like Coruscant in Attack of the Clones when Zam Wessel is being chased by Anakin and Obi-Wan. So I absolutely love the scene, the sequence, and the music just was upbeat and I don't know, and the sound design. I mean, the sound design is always great. I think the people at Skywalker Ranch just produce great, amazing stuff to listen to. So and I love all the fixated shots. It felt like a Phantom Menace, all these fixated shots on the engines turning on, and it was just great. And the way they called each of the racers out and stuff, total Phantom Menace moment. So there's just tons to love here, and I just like, rather than the first race that happened in the episode, or compared to how many races were in this episode, like 3. It's like the first one that we were like introduced to Teo, then the second one where Teo was taken out, and then the third one with Tech, right? Okay.
Mhm.
I don't know this last one, just because it was the point of the story, I guess. It was just really exhilarating and all that stuff. I don't know, Chelsea, did you love the race?
Yeah, it was a lot of fun and just, foreshadowing from the first race or second race about the tunnels. I was like, okay, like as soon as Tech was racing, it's like he's gonna conquer that. I think one of my favorite aspects about the sequence is how before when they're doing the announcing, they're like, and Tech. Just Tech, and people are like, okay.
Yeah.
And then he finishes and wins, and everyone's like, woo, Tech.
Yeah.
And he's kind of just like confused, like he doesn't know how to like accept like the adoration. But another thing that popped up in the back of my mind is like, okay, like I think this is a planet we've never heard of before, right? Or like a city on a planet, so maybe they shouldn't be too worried. But I'm like, should we be worried about now like a giant crowd knows who Tech is and knows his face and know what he's capable of? Like, I don't know. Like, I can't help but be, maybe that's just like leftover from Andor, where I'm just absolutely terrified of the Empire being able to see everything and anything, that I'm like, Tech is probably okay after this. I mean, I'm sure they're going to encounter some problems later on. Hopefully not as a direct result of this. Anyway, that's a
Right.
tangent, but
That's good thinking.
that was really fun. And also the way like Wrecker and Omega run straight up to him and are like, woo, woo, like that was just like a nice moment. But yeah, it was definitely lots of fun. Like you said, the kind of the way they like pay homage to different aspects of Star Wars is just really, really neat.
Awesome. Yeah.
Mhm.
And the tech moment was seriously cool. And seeing the would you say juxtaposition of how they treated him at the beginning with as you were saying and at the end, yeah, that was a total moment and have him having his moment but not knowing how to react was hilarious. So yeah, thank you for pointing that out. That's I just I didn't notice these things until like the second time around I watched this episode. And I was like, man, that those moments just stuck out. So yeah, thank you for highlighting them. Austin, what about you? What did you take away from this race?
Well, first, I just want to say that I thought the same thing as Chelsea, and I could have sworn, maybe I'm crazy, that there was like a camera droid tracing or like chasing but it could have just been for like the screens or whatever. But imagine this is like broadcasted on like TV, and like Admiral Rampart, like, is like watching or something, or he goes into that one bar on Coruscant that we saw in Attack of the Clones that's like playing sports, and all of a sudden it's all of a sudden it's Tech up there. And we see like all of a sudden Tech is like this celebrity, or Hunter and Echo out there and flipping through the channels. All of a sudden it's like Tech did what, like, that could actually come back to them. I would really like to see that happen because yeah, like I feel like this episode really kind of set things up. So yeah, you mentioned too like Phantom Menace parallels. I think another big one was like Tech being able to be in the race, kind of a parallel to Anakin Skywalker being the only human able to do the pod race. It's kind of similar thing that we see. It's pretty much only droids doing these races. So I really like that. It felt like Tech got his moment to be special and such. So I really enjoyed that, and everybody praising him at the end. So
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Oh wait, one more thing I thought about though. Wasn't Tech's leg broken like a couple of weeks ago? Like,
Oh,
how is
you're
your? I
right.
mean, there's Bacta, and I know like that's the thing. I feel like we know how Bacta works, but also like we don't. Like, can that heal a broken leg that fast, or is he just really toughing it out? Like,
So true.
could
I
also be like Clone Wars situation where the timeline's just so wonky. Like I could see that
yeah,
being a case where this actually takes place before the premiere episodes or something.
Mm,
oh
Kind of
boy,
like
yeah,
Clone Wars, or like there's just a big time jump type thing.
yeah,
Yeah, because I
that's
feel like
true.
it's one of those types of shows where it's like timeline don't really matter. We're just, you just kind of throw on an episode and you can tune in wherever.
I'm more of the former on that, but you know what? I would like to think that the writers would remember that Tech did break his leg, because I had totally forgot about that. So yeah, you're right. And I just want to say, you Austin saying about the whole human thing, Tech being able to do it. Yeah, that's so true. And I love how Teo made like a comment, like you wouldn't know that human or something. Like he made like a comment to Tech about him, being a human or whatever. So very funny. Okay, so last point that we want to touch on here is after the wager is respected, Maligi's racer makes an attempt to shoot at the outcast, and I was like, "Oh shoot!" I literally got on the edge of my seat or edge of my bed, and I was like, "Is Sid gonna die?" I thought that was what was gonna happen because Sid actually got some character exploration in this episode. So I was like, wow, they just like shed some light into that. And then all of a sudden you just see that racer going for the gun. I'm like, did I just see that? I'm like, what's happening here? So it was a very tense moment. So I thought Sid was gonna bite it. But I was surprised that Maligi stopped him and warned him, like it warned the Bad Batch to watch their backs. He's like, you guys have a lot of loyalty to Sid, but that is not reciprocated. Watch your backs. I was like, that's ominous. I'm intrigued. If this was one of my problems with Bad Batch that I can't really binge it is because there's just so many blocks that I don't know. Like you just get your okay. So like yesterday after I watched Bad Batch, I'm like, you know what show I haven't watched in a long time? Jessica Jones. So I started watching the first episode, Jessica Jones, and I forgot how brilliant the first episode is, and it ends on such a like hook that you just want to like take it and watch the next episode, right? So I think that a lot of these streaming shows should have a hook at the end of the episode to entice the viewer to watch the next episode. If they thought what they liked in the episode and then you have a nice hook, they're gonna proceed. Bad Batch, there's nothing like that in the first season. There's little moments, but other than that, there's really nothing proclaiming to me to, oh, you should watch this multiple episodes at once. Maybe as a Star Wars fan, like I just want to know what happens, but as a show, like it just doesn't have that nice structure, I guess. That's just me. That's how I like my show sometimes. I like that hook. So anyways, this season, I mean, you start off with season 2 with the Rampart when he kills Wilco. That was insane. When, I think the previous episode with Cody finding out that Cody's gone and stuff, he's gone AWOL. I'm like, oh my, I want to know what happens next. And that's exactly what happened here with Sid's backstory and Maligi warning them about Sid. So Austin, I mean, we already talked about Sid and some of the development she got in this episode. Like, what do you think this means? Is this like actual foreshadowing, or is this something that will never come into fruition?
I honestly, maybe I'm just getting my hopes up, but I really hope that it's a moment for Omega to grow up, because as Chelsea mentioned, we see Omega all the time being like, of course we'll help, like, or challenging, being hard-headed, and in order for her character to really grow, and for me to really appreciate those types of moments, I feel like Omega and maybe even the rest of the Bad Batch really needs to learn, like you see very quickly Omega and the rest of the Bad Batch crew, they pretty much take like zero time to even think about what he said or anything. It was just kind of like, yeah, right, and I really think that it's going to come back and bite them. And I think that would be a great moment for, it sucks to say, like, obviously I don't want to see this kid go through betrayal and, getting her, backstabbed, but also it really might make her grow up more and kind of learn, like, oh, maybe, I need to calm down and pick my battles correctly and, really take the time to think about things. Don't just instantly trust, because we know in Star Wars, it's not the greatest thing to always trust someone right away, as much as Omega is a great character, and I hope that she doesn't lose her kind heart that she has. It also could really put her in danger, and I think that's a lesson Omega needs to learn. So I really hope that this kind of is a way to for Omega to kind of learn, like, okay, maybe not everybody in the galaxy is great, because Omega's been out in the galaxy for what, a year now, at most a few months, 6 months, maybe 6 months to a year she's been out and about. So she still has a lot of lessons to learn, and but I feel like that really does contribute to her hard-headedness. So I really hope she's the next Ahsoka, the next Ezra, where it's like, it's the show is really about this journey of growing up, and then you can appreciate those moments where she was hard-headed and you're like, sweet summer child, like you had no idea it was coming to you. So
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with you, and I think I looked at it like that, but I didn't, because inside I was like, yes, Omega, I'm glad this is happening to you, but I didn't put in my head, in my thoughts, that it's character, she's gonna grow up, it's maturity and stuff like that because of these experiences. So yeah, that's a really great point. How about you, Chelsea? What did you take away from this end scene?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see where they go, because you see Sid earlier in the episode really insisting, like, I've changed. So it's like, how much of that is truth versus just maybe a little bit of like bargaining for her life and freedom. But I also think like the points you both have brought up have been really great and got me thinking, like, the Bad Batch is kind of with Sid out of necessity because they escaped from the Empire and they need funds, they need food on the table, they needed work. So I think now this sets it up really nicely, which where the show is kind of going towards with like a clone, not rebellion, because like there's not really, they're not under a certain thing anymore, right? But like a collectivization. They're becoming a collective, if you will. I may have just made up a word, right? But the clones coming together and finding a purpose of like fighting against the Empire, something like that. So maybe now that they're had the seeds of doubt for loyalty with Sid, they'll be more inclined to leave and journey out and get involved in more of those things. But also seeing it as an opportunity for character growth. Yes, Webby has made her guest appearance by Webby.
Yes. I love that.
So yeah, I think it sets up a lot of really good potential storylines and character development. So
Yes,
Awesome.
I'm so sorry to cut in, but Chelsea made me think of a theory, and I really have to say it. So I feel like the Bad Batch these last 4 episodes have been very particular, like Mike said, in setting stuff up. You know, like we kind of get a setup that Crosshair could perhaps be questioning his loyalty to the Empire, a setup with Admiral Rampart, and then this episode, the setup with Sid. What if it's all kind of leading to the same thing? Because in episode 1, Sid mentions, and you know, her friend that was there, they all mentioned that they're gonna have to start thinking of retirement soon, because while the whole operation is working now, the Empire could come in at any point, and more than likely will come in at some point and shut the whole operation down. What if when the Empire comes in and shuts them down, they did that as a setup, because when the Empire comes in, Sid could continue her operations by giving up the Bad Batch and being like, oh, the Bad Batch, they're right there. And also, you know, those clones you're looking for, that Rex guy, he's been in and out of here a few times. You know, there's the droid from Camino right there. He's my bartender. I'll give it all up to you if I can continue my operations. Because we see that they're setting things up. They're obviously foreshadowing something there with the everything getting shut down. They're now foreshadowing Sid perhaps betraying them, and they're foreshadowing the fact that the Empire is kind of on this weird journey of kind of looking for the Bad Batch. Are they dead? Are they alive? What if it's all leading to the same thing?
Very true. I didn't even put all those things together. Yeah, for sure. I want to go back and watch that first scene with Sid and her friend there. So yeah, very good. I mean, that's an interesting theory, and I mean, you're right. It's all leading somewhere for sure. When we'll get that, we don't know. Maybe the mid-season thing. Maybe it could be like a like they did in Rebel season 2, where they were alluding to the base getting raided on what Gorel, and then it happening and stuff, and that was the mid-season finale. So it could totally be that. So yeah, thank you for bringing that up, actually. So with that being said, us covering this episode and talking about it, discussing, Chelsea, out of 10, what would you rate this episode?
You know, before this, I was like gonna give it a 7, but after hearing more, like Austin has brought up so many good points about like where this could lead to. I'm like, I'm gonna bump it up to an 8.
Oh,
I had fun with it, and I think it's setting up for some really intriguing stuff.
You're right about that. I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. Maybe a 7. I'd probably go 7.5. Now, I was talking about this. I want to go back and watch it a third time just because I had fun with it and stuff. It definitely feels like the regular Bad Batch type stuff that we've gotten, but it's very different because it actually has substance in it. And this is an episode that I've kind of wanted in season 1. Not that it doesn't belong here, but it's just like, I think the premiere is still my least favorite. I think we've been there, done that. But I think this is a really good, solid standalone episode. I don't know, Austin, but how would you rate it?
I said this on Twitter earlier, but I really think this is one of the better episodes of the Bad Batch because, like I said earlier, I just feel like they actually gave some substance to what could have just been a very formulaic episode. 9 out of 10 for me. I had fun with it. There was great character moments. You know, we learned a lot more about the Bad Batch. Could lead to some great stuff. 9 out of 10.
9 out of 10. All right.
Well, don't make me regret it, Bad Batch.
It's crazy how perspectives of episodes that, you know, come out, like Obi-Wan. Week to week, I was like enjoying every episode. But once you take a step back and you're like, I didn't like that, you know, or even Book of Boba Fett, where it's like the finale. Oh man, that was good. Haven't rewatched it since. Like, it was just, it exists, you know. So it's just crazy when we take a step back and realize what the show did. It's like, yeah, don't let me down because I'm supporting you right now. I'm rooting for you. Okay, so well, that's the discussion. Thank you guys all for checking out this show, this video, this podcast, whatever you want to call it. It means so much to me and the people I have here sitting with me. So to me, a major part of Star Wars is just being, experiencing the content, the stories, but also it's about, sitting and chatting with friends and conversing and stuff. And I think that's just part of the Star Wars fan experience. So thank you for joining us. Also, a very big thank you to my group here. Chelsea, thank you for coming on. Where can people keep up with you when you're not talking Bad Batch?
You can find me on Instagram at Jedi_Chelsea.
Awesome. Big slay. Austin, what about you? Where can people find you when you're not on the Bad Batch after show?
You can find me on Instagram at StarWars.editor. You can find me on YouTube as well, doing some stuff there. You can also find Chelsea and I on our podcast. This is The Wayseekers, which is returning real soon. We're very excited to, talk about Mandalorian, and you may see a familiar face on the podcast at some point, so or a familiar voice if you're listening.
Oh yeah, true. Very true.
Yeah.
Depends where you're tuning in, but yeah.
Yeah.
All
And,
right,
where can people find you at, Mike?
Oh, thank you. I have a co-host here. You guys can find me at all_Star Wars on Instagram, Twitter, and here on this YouTube channel and the Star Wars Exchange. And by the way, all of these guys' stuff will be linked in the description. And also, like I said, the Bad Batch after show. We're here next week. And I think the week after that, I think then we switch back over to the Star Wars Exchange and we'll be back. I don't know. We'll keep you guys posted. But if we're planning to do an episode for each one, or at least I am. So if you're not, if you don't see an episode go up, check my Instagram or the community tab here to keep posted. But they will most likely just be alternating if you don't see an episode. So be sure to also subscribe to the Star Wars Exchange because you'll see some Bad Batch coverage there. All right. So until next time, folks, join us next week for the next Bad Batch episode and see if we like it. Does it break away from the formula? Is it something new and different like this one? I don't know. We'll have to see. So join us next week. But until then, may the Force be with you. Until next time, adios.